Welcome, everyone. Hope you're having a good day. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Deacon Vicki Hanrahan, Assistant to the Bishop for Synodical Life, and we thank you for making these Tuesday webinars a part of your day. Today, Bishop Rogness will be sharing with you the future work of the ELCA that ELCA leaders got a glimpse of yesterday. As our shared work is guided by the ELCA, I think you'll appreciate getting a little window into the vision of the future of our church. Also, you may have heard of the sad news of the death of Reverend Peter Steinke. Bishop Rogness will share some thoughts about this beloved church leader. He was an ELCA parish pastor, a therapist, an internationally recognized leadership consultant, and executive director of Healthy Congregations. You, like we, may have called him the family systems guy. He wrote many books on the topic of how our church family works and how we interact with one another in our congregations. And Bishop Rogness is going to frame a conversation on a piece of that topic. So as ever, throughout the hour, feel free to write your questions in the chat area and to also put links to resources that you think of that you think might be helpful for others to know about. And also note that we are recording the webinar today, as we always do, in case you want to revisit something later, or for those who were unable to attend the webinar. You will find these recordings on the Synod website, which is, as you know, www.scsw-elca.org/webinars. So it's easy to find. Okay, let's center ourselves and open with a word of prayer. Generous God, we thank you for this day and your purpose for it. As the events of our days and this time in our congregations continue to unfold, we seek your clarity and your peace. Come, Holy Spirit, as we struggle for solutions and direction amidst differing personalities. Help us to know that we are not expected to be perfect and that we may fall short in our faithful response to you. Help us endure disagreement and strife with godly courage and love, patience and kindness, gentleness and self-control. Grant us peace in knowing we are always in pursuit of your purpose for our lives. We ask this through your Son's holy name. Amen. Bishop Rogness, thank you. I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks. And welcome once again to all of you. I don't think we've counted how many of these we've had, but we're well into 3 months worth of it anyway, maybe more. And we keep getting anywhere from 40 to 70 some people on these, even in the middle of summer. So I'm hopeful that means that you're finding these conversations helpful. I do. I think it's a good way to stay in touch and to be together in times when we can't be together. So thank you for that. I wanted to say a few things before we do breakout groups and then come back together. First is a meeting a couple weeks ago, a week or two ago, of the Bishop Election Task Force. It occurred to us as we were talking about it, and we happened to make mention of these gatherings, that in a little over a month now, we'll gather in the assembly format that we've chosen to, among other things, elect a bishop. And the call committee has set 4 people before the synod for consideration and election, 2 of whom are in our synod and have been part of these conversations, Rami Bakken and Naomi Garber, all along. And it occurred to us we ought to invite Joy Mortensen-Wiebe and Stacy Fiddler to be part of these conversations as well, as their schedules allow. And I think I see that Joy has joined us today. Joy, say hello. And I can't see if Stacy is there, but I don't see everybody on this anyway. So anyway, as you see their names, they will be part of these conversations as their schedules allow as we go forward. A couple of things I wanted to talk about just in terms of some things that have been going on. A few of you maybe are aware, more of you will become aware in coming weeks, I suspect, that that the churchwide organization has been part of a kind of looking towards the future and thinking about how do we best posture ourselves to be church in the future. If you've been in this game for a long time, as I have, you recognize that every 5-10 years, every so often, the church takes a look at itself and restructures itself, and often in a time of not robust finances, it's meant some staff cutting back as well, and some rearranging how we do our work and letting go of some portions of our work. Well, Bishop Eaton has had a futures task force looking at some of those same issues, and yesterday they rolled out an initial look of the kind of things that they're thinking about. And I'm not going to go into it. It was an hour long, and even that was just an introduction. I just want to mention a couple things. One is that even though this isn't simply a restructuring or a staff retrenching or cutting, it will involve a little bit of both of that. There will be some restructuring. There'll both be some reduction of staff, but it's more importantly, as Bishop Eaton talked about it, an attempt to both not only reposition us, but to change the culture of the church, make it much more collaborative, much more open to new ideas, and to place more of an emphasis on innovation and inviting ideas to bubble up from wherever in the church that might be, not just in offices in Chicago or even just in synods, but in the congregations across the life of the church as well. So their focus is on just changing the culture to be less institutional, more innovative, more nimble, more agile, more flexible. And we've used some of those words before. Whether this is more successful at it, we'll see, but it's an effort worth having, I think. So they spoke in terms of instead of an organizational chart, they spoke of a kind of almost an infinity graph that had, I even have it in front of me, over on one side, service ministries, justice ministries, that kind of edge of the church's life, and over on the other side, Christian community and leadership, congregational vitality at the center of that, and then connecting them in between are both a center for innovation. I'm looking at my chart, innovation and basic operations administrative work. So it's all meant to sort of flow together. That's a really quick, maybe too long for those of you that don't much care about structure, but at any rate, you're going to be hearing about this, and it's I thought maybe helpful to give you at least a little quick glimpse of what's going on. The second thing I wanted to say a little bit about, and this sort of launches us into some conversation I think would be helpful for us to have. I would guess, because he's been around the church for a long time, and I suspect a number of you have, that the name Peter Steinke isn't new to you, that you're aware of some of the work that he's done in family systems and healthy congregational dynamics, and he's been a great presenter both for ELCA leadership. A number of synods have had him. I don't know if the South Central Synod ever had him for a synodical event. I know some of you here have been a part of some of the work that he does. But he died this past week. And in some of the announcements about him, some of the reflections, particularly on I happen to be on two listservs right now, the current ELCA bishop listserv and the ex-bishop's listserv, which frankly, after 30 years, that's a lot bigger. But But there were a number of reflections because Peter had been a great gift to the church and had really traveled around the church a lot. I want to read you one of those reflections. This one from Roy Riley, who was for years bishop out in New Jersey, was chair of the Conference of Bishops for a time. Wonderful guy. But he had used Pete Steinke for a synod event there. And it was about the time, those of you that were in ministry, say 15 years ago, know that in those years, particularly leading up to the decisions that we made in 2009, and then in the subsequent years, the shakeout years after those sexuality ordination decisions, those were pretty tumultuous years in an awful lot of parishes. And a lot of pastors found themselves dealing with people who had very strong ideas, were deeply upset, and who took it out on the pastor and the congregation. And that was a rough time in the life of the church. And Roy remembered having Pete Steinke in at that point. And I want to read you what Roy summarized what Pete had done in that synod. And I want you to think about it and sort of translate to the kinds of observations that a number of you have shared about what you're dealing with in your congregation. Some of you have, in these conversations, have talked about the fact that you've had really good conversations with respectful and thoughtful people trying to steer your congregation ahead. And a number of you have had to put up with some pretty upset and strong-minded, insistent folks that are hard to deal with. I think it's a good thing to, so I want us, after I read this, I'm going to pose the question for you as you go into some breakout groups. We'll do 12 minutes this time. We keep being told, boy, we run out of time in a hurry, and that's a good thing, I guess. But I want you to, after you've introduced yourselves, as I ask you to do each time, and talk a bit about where you are and what's going on in ministry, I want you to focus on your own experiences recently of dealing with difficult dynamics within the congregation. Some of you will immediately launch into some tough conversations you've had. Some of you, it may not have been as much of an uproar in the congregation, but you've got people in the congregation that will fit the kind of description that is talked about here. So let me read you from Roy Riley's post. Roy writes, years ago, when the conversations about human sexuality were boiling over in congregations, we asked Pete Steinke to spend a day with our pastors. By then, virtually all of our pastors had been punished at least once by an angry tirade from one of their own parishioners. After listening to one pastor after another tell these stories of over-the-top wrath, Peter said to them, as best I can paraphrase it now, "You have to let this go. This isn't about you. Anger that lashes out like this is coming from a place hidden from you. It may be something going on at home or at work. It may be coming out of the pain of a broken or breaking relationship or the person's own self-conflict. You may need to learn what that original pain is about. You can't do that without understanding that this is not about you. The church community is the only safe place for them to vent their anger. You can't fire them. You won't walk out on the relationship. The church community may be their only safe place to express their pain and frustration. You are that safe place. At the end of the day, it's not about you. It's no fun. It is, however, ministry." Now, I think we live in a time that's a little bit different from those sexuality wars, but we do live in a time when, for many people, the church is the one place they can vent and exercise themselves, even throw their weight around in ways that they can't in their workplace, can't in their family, can't other places, and may seek to sort of try to take control in ways that aren't healthy and that are very difficult for us who find ourselves as the pastoral leaders in those places. So with that, let's talk about how we respond to people who are in not healthy ways and over-the-top ways, expressing rage. Some of you will have some pretty immediate stories to tell, maybe others of you not quite so much. Let's go into small groups to talk about that a bit, and then come back and sort of take the temperature of life in the synod for the time being. So
It's like the teacher has left the room and we're here all by ourselves. What are we going to do? I'm still laughing from our breakout room. Let me compose myself here. Yay.
We only have to wait for what, 5 minutes before the professor shows up and then we can leave?
Precisely.
That's if he's tenured. That's if he's not tenured. It's 15 minutes, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
10 minutes if tenured.
Oh, okay.
At Gustavus, that's what it was. Anyway.
Get control of your classroom, Bishop.
Those are Gustavus rules.
well, I don't have a PhD, and they're the ones you have to wait the longest for, you know. Oh, I see. Is everybody getting a quick question about the timing for today's breakout?
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and you can see the answers coming in.
Oh, good. Well, we'll have to take a look at that. So, so Pete Steinke's admonition was, remember, it's not about you. You get dealt a hand. We find ourselves in a situation now that creates a whole lot of anxiety and probably impatience among people in the midst of a polarized time in which we live. And not surprisingly, we end up with a lot of folks acting out in parishes. What insights were you able to share in some of your group conversations about coping with the anxiety that the people bring into you? Who would like to share some of the conversation from your group?
I shared that I stayed connected with colleagues and have had a practice of meeting with a clinical psychologist and 2 other pastors for 90 minutes for the last 14 years. And I have done a lot of contemplative prayer, spiritual direction, physical stuff. I've known Peter since the early 90s and have been trained with him in healthy congregations and bridge builders over the 3 decades before starting seminary, through seminary, and then in my congregation. So I just want to say I took he and Edwin Friedman's, Murray Bowen, all the other folks in the systems theory stuff seriously about taking care of self. But it's really hard not to take it personally. Just because I do that doesn't mean it's hard. It means it is hard. So
I chop wood and kick the dog.
There's a whole lot of folks who, a whole lot of people in ministry, surveys tell us, who are people pleasers. We like to be liked by folks. And when someone is venting and we aren't liked very much, that's hard for folks. It's hard. His advice of
Well, did we lose our bishop? Yes, right. Oh, there he is. He's back. One moment.
I realized I was muted, so I went to unmute myself and left the meeting. You got to watch which button you click, I guess. So, others, what observations did you bring to your conversations? Someone in the chat room is asking, did anyone else along with me do their CPE at Mendota Mental Health Center in Madison? I'm curious as to why that question. David, you want to say more about the question?
Yes, I actually do want to. I actually have been trying to say more about this question for quite some time, but I've been unsuccessful. Well, your question last week is where I was at. Is what concerns you most right now, and it wasn't about things inside my two congregations. It's what's going on in the world around us that concerns me the most. And Portland's incident of federal troops coming in and doing bodily injury and harassment to Black Lives Matter protesters deeply concerns me, and news that it's probably coming to Chicago next. So I've read a lot of other things, been paying attention, but this is my true confession of things. Having done my CPE at Mendota Mental Health Center in Madison, I just want to weigh in and say this, and this has always concerned me, is that when I hear Donald Trump speak, he always takes me back there. Always. So that's what concerns me now. And I believe for some time we're in danger. And I just listened to On Point this morning with Daryl Johnson, who used to work for the Homeland Security under Barack Obama and previously. And his several books, his latest 2019 is Hateland, is that we are in trouble with the infiltration of white supremacy into the police and into our federal government. So that's why I asked the question, because I want to see if anyone else's experience resonates with my experience of CPE at Mendota.
So connect again the CPE at Mendota with what you're saying about your concern about what's going on within society now.
That my concern is that, as Mary Trump has said about her uncle, he creates situations for conflict and violence to happen. And if you've read the books, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, there's 2 volumes, 27 and 37 psychiatrists, take your pick. And I thought Michael Cohen's testimony was spot on. And I think I think in short, Peter, I think the nation has a mental health crisis, and it's in the Oval Office, and this is dangerous. Yeah.
David, I think I know what you're saying, but I'm not hearing what the issue at Mendota that raises that concern clearly.
Well, is it Peter?
Yeah, this is Peter. I'm sorry.
When you serve at Mendota for 90 days, you're around every type.
So does everybody know what the circumstances at Mendota for doing CPE are?
Mendota is a forensic mental health center, meaning it's people who are there have mental illness, and they also commit and create criminal behaviors. So So at Mendota, we have, serial killers, rapists, arsonists, and the con artist, and who do great harm in society. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm connecting the dots with my experience at Mendota. And you're around these people every day. And sometimes you just eat lunch with them and they're in recovery. And it's a very fascinating place. It's also a very dangerous place. You never go out of the sight of the guards.
Let me try and take your observation about Donald Trump and this moment in our national psyche or national culture, and relate it to our ministry in this way. One of the effects that many columnists, many analysts have written about is the unleashing of, how best do I say this? The unleashing of permission to exercise an us-them kind of a attitude towards other people. That is a tribalization, a demonization of those who are opposed. We see it in the tribalism of the divisions within the country and so on, and have modeled for us by political leaders a drive to not so much help people find common ground, but rather just the opposite, to sort of divide and seek to prevail over the other. If that, to the degree that that's what's going on in our culture right now, seems to me we then face the challenge of speaking to that from the point of view of a Christian ethic, believing in a God who has created all things, whose love for all things is unbounded, and who seek to care for the whole of society, in particular the marginalized, the ostracized, the other. We are not to seek to diminish the other, but as a Christian ethic, just the opposite. We are to include and draw in and bring reconciliation between factions. If that's our ethic, but we have in our congregations in front of us, every time we speak to them, we have people who are participating in this culture that is increasingly fractured, and we have within our congregations people who are participating in that division. So how do we begin to deal with, how do we become countercultural? How do we become a redemptive element in that demonic work within society? That gets to be a pretty broad question, but I think it is a link between the observation you're making, David, and the challenge that we all face as local leaders of faith communities. This would probably also be a better question to deal with in breakouts of a few people here and there.
I think Peter Heidi had a hand raised. Did you have something else to add, Peter, or?
No, I was just going to be quippy when we lost Peter earlier, that Bishop Peter earlier, that I was going to say we seem to lose bishops way too fast.
Ouch.
Oh, boom.
Ouch.
So we're so glad that you were able to find your way back, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. I don't know what comment to make to that one.
Maybe with any luck, that string will be over, but come the end of August.
We can hope.
Yeah.
We can hope. That's right.
I just want, I'm Paula Harris at St. John in Reedsburg. I started 3 weeks before COVID, and Reedsburg is in Sauk County. I came here from Dane County, and Sauk County is incredibly politically divided, and that's definitely represented in the church. I was told in the call committee that there were people on who would table for both parties, and if I went round to the state fair or something like that, and that's definitely represented. But also I'll say that there are people from both parties who have different levels of spiritual health and different levels of the capacity to manage their own and others' anxiety. And so when the Reedsburg School District decided last night to open schools in the fall for K-8 and then do a kind of split thing for high school, middle. But so St. John has been having worship for 2 weeks now, as safe as we can. And man, I've got it from both sides, right? There are conservatives yelling because we're not doing this thing, that thing. There are liberals yelling because we're not mandating this thing and that thing. And so the most recent of those conflicts, I mean, I do the stuff that Michael mentioned earlier, obviously, but the most recent of those I took to the council officers because it's hard to convene a council of 12 and it's hard to resolve a difficult situation in that way. And they represented the differences really well politically already. I kind of knew that. And we're in touch with the people who are in the most distress. So we worked out some compromises. It's really interesting. And I felt like they were good compromises and the council blessed them in the appropriate kind of structural process. And as soon as we implemented them, I personally had a really rough day, and my spouse pointed out that was because the compromises don't reflect my sense of what should be going on there with the church. I feel good about the ministry process, and even though some of the comments were delivered personally, I didn't really think they were about me. They were about other kinds of situations. But I chose a way forward to try to reflect my values. But this is a rough time, and those divisions in society are definitely in the church. But also, this church has the capacity to kind of pick some leaders who their politics are in various places, but their spiritual lives are also the leaders' spiritual lives are in a good space. So that makes a big difference, I think, is which leaders we're working with.
Thank you for that. I think you're blessed to have people who can recognize that they are in very different places and yet don't walk away from each other because of that, but can hang in there and recognize the importance of the unity of Christ, really, to be part of a spiritual community, that's their anchor, not their political leaning.
And one of my broken records is I'm here to be a pastor for the whole church.
Sure. Yeah. Good. Thanks for that, Paula. Others of you that have had to deal with this kind of division within your congregations.
One of the things that I've shared with different individuals and councils is that if we hold to the fact that our unity comes from our baptism in Christ, then we can and really cling to that. Then we can have conversation about those things which we disagree, and not let them divide us, because that unity comes from our baptism.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think we can say that enough. Well, let me shift gears for a moment and raise something much more detailed, practical, kind of an issue, more for my information, perhaps for yours as well. I've been contacted by some folks in Dane County who do the taping of their worship service in the sanctuary, and have been now told that anything that happens within a sanctuary, according to Dane County's recent order, anything that happens in a sanctuary is a meeting, and everybody at a meeting must be masked, and that includes the speaker who is preaching, and that the news media, television stations, got from the county an exemption to that order because the order was given with no exceptions at all. Have any of you, particularly those of you in Dane County, encountered that and had to deal with it? It'd be helpful for me to know, and for the source of all, interestingly, the source of all this, Rick Bloom, who's the administrator at Good Shepherd in Madison and Verona, is the administrator there. They do their taping of their worship service in the sanctuary, so they're affected by this. And Rick came to that position from the media world. So he's back talking to his people that got the exception. But I'm curious as to if any of the rest of you, if you want to mention it here or raise your hand, that's fine. If not, if you have other comments or insights, experiences to share with me, let me know about that. Sort of like back when the order was first given that seemed to eliminate parking lot worship back in April, and we had to go to bat to try and get that loosened. Doesn't look like Don.
I said if we're going to have in-person worship, and we've had worship for the last 2 weeks now, everybody's going to wear a mask, and it was unpopular, but come the day of worship, nobody really fought it, and it's different. Preaching through a mask, which I've done, which Vicar Tyler has done, but it can be done. So I don't think in my context it would do for me to be removing the mask when I'm requiring the mask of those who are in the sanctuary. So, and doing that for all the health reasons.
We've had some experience or some conversation about this, not just in this synod, but more broadly. And one of the points that's been made is that for clergy who are preaching, whether online or real, number of members who may be hard of hearing depend on reading lips, having whatever hearing they do enhanced by being able to read lips. And so that too is part of the concern. I heard of one just yesterday who had a mask made with a circular plastic inset, so they could wear a mask but you could still read the lips. I thought that was interesting. I think we're going to kick it if nobody else has anything to jump in with right at this moment.
There's some comments about wearing masks in the chat room. We've got Rich McClear asks, anyone have or had weddings or baptisms? And what are you doing for those? Rich, is that your general question, or did you want to know specifically about wearing masks for those?
No, everything. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Rich, if you call me, I just had a baptism Sunday afternoon.
I did a baptism also. I blessed the water, and then the parents did the imposition of water while I spoke the words at a distance.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's
very helpful.
It's helpful to know what folks, I always feel like I'm going to end up being burned at the stake because I agree to do something that's important for some people in my context. and I feel like we can do it because I'm in a really, really rural and odd place. But it would probably be, I would benefit a lot and be less anxious if there was even stats put out that said, you know, some places where the counties aren't as hot are doing, you know, the occasional wedding with a lot of distancing, and here's the precautions. I mean, I'm up late at night over this stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Rich, that it's helpful for just to have a frame of reference, have some idea of what I can share with you. Just after last Tuesday's gathering, I got an email. It wasn't from anybody on this Zoom call, but I got an email from somebody, a council member in a congregation that said, we're going to be looking at doing, we're going to be meeting to talk about in-person worship. And starting it, and it would be helpful if we could know how many in the synod are doing in-person worship. Well, we don't track that. That is, we don't have any means of knowing of the 138, so many are doing this or this or this. But the next morning, we happened to have a dean's meeting. So I asked the deans, I just had them go around and say, help me answer this question. Talk about your own conference and who you're aware of doing in-person worship. And I don't think there was a conference that had more than 4. And I think 2 or 3 conferences, the dean said they didn't think anybody in the conference was doing in-person worship yet. So it's not very many. Some were still in the planning stages, planning for it. And there were several reports of congregations that had begun it, and then in the recent in the last week or two, when the numbers reported went way up, they pulled back and stopped doing, either stopped hosting it or stopped planning to do it. So anyway, it's all over the map. I am doing now we're into ordination times for those graduates that are coming out and now getting calls. I have 3 on the docket. All of them are happening in safe distancing, wearing masks. One's going to be at the biggest church, Bethel, with 10 people, and streamed beyond that. So I think most of our places are still very carefully observing masking and distancing and moving very cautiously to more interaction. Not surprisingly, as we see the numbers go up so quickly. I see what Vicki says about in the chat room, wedding coming up. All have said they're going to be masks. Michael Lee's willing to talk to folks offline about what he's done. One question is, do you have to wear a mask if preaching outside? The Dane County order was for inside. So I think, I don't think I don't know about mask orders for outside. I would simply say, wear a mask all the time. If you are preaching in an outside environment quite far away from others, that it would seem to me is a time safe to take a mask off outside, away from others. But others of you may have other observations about that. Kristen asks about official word about outdoor worship, maximum attendance in Dane County. Outdoor gatherings are limited to 25, but worship services are exempt from that. I don't have an authoritative answer to that. Does anybody? Well, we'll keep checking. I noticed, I suppose that's either Vicki or Robin that's posting these little questionnaires. Very helpful. Can you add drive-in worship to the poll? Somebody asks. Paula Harris says she has a face shield for outside. Well, we're coming out, this is very helpful to have you posting this. If you do go online, if you don't have a chance to read them all here, but you're curious about this, when Vicki announces at the beginning, these are all recorded and then they're posted on the website, and the chat is all there in what is posted, so you can go back and look at that. We're coming up close to the end of the hour, and I know Vicki has a few announcements about we're heavy now into figuring out the planning for this assembly. She can update you a little on that and on a couple other things. So Vicki, let's give you a couple minutes for some announcements before we close this off.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we are continuing to work on our setup for Synod Assembly, so I just wanted to give you a little bit of update there, because you're probably going to start to have questions about how are we actually going to be doing this. Please do continue to pay attention to what matters. We are going to be providing more detailed information for that very, very soon, I promise. We are grateful that we've had 3 other synods. 2 have already conducted their video conference Synod Assembly. 1 is doing theirs this weekend, and we've been meeting with them, and we've been meeting with ELCA Secretary. We'll be meeting with Sue Rothmeyer because she's been helping with the voting at those assemblies. So we are doing our best to take advantage of their learnings, and then we're going to design ours in the best way possible. So thank you for your patience as we do our due diligence on this. We look forward to a successful assembly on Saturday, August 29th. It is a video conference. It is a video conference in which everyone will participate from their home. So no longer do they need to go to a congregation to do this, although that might be an option for some of our more technically challenged people, but we'll give you some suggestions for that in the future. And we will be communicating in detail how this is going to work. So you've been very patient, and we appreciate your trust in us. We just ask that for a little bit while longer as we finish out our conversations this week and make our decisions with the executive committee here very, very soon. So you should be seeing something hopefully next week on how this will all work, and it's going to be great. It's going to be different, but we'll make it as great as we can. And that's really all I had to share. Any other comments, Bishop?
I don't think so. We did, I mean, we will plan, the line I've used again and again in the planning that we're doing for this Synod Assembly is, let's learn a lot from the people that are doing it already. Let's not put ourselves in the position of being the first ones to be trying something. Let's do what we know works. And but even then, you can't be for sure. Western North Dakota was the synod that just did it last weekend, including with an election starting with an ecclesiastical ballot. They had no way of foreseeing that that after they got underway on Friday morning, there was a power outage for the whole city of Minot that threw them for a loop. But they had some contingency plans and were able to even cope with that. We'll do the same. So anyway, keep tuned on all that, and stay in touch with us in this venue. We've just had some conversation about posting ahead of time a sort of a focus, and occasionally, as we did with Everett Mitchell, a resource person that may provide some input and some stimulation for these conversations going forward. So thanks to all of you for everything you do in ministry, and thanks for giving one another this hour of your time today.
Thanks
Thank you.
everyone for joining us today. It's always better with you here. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.